attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, and thank you for joining us today and being part of the Rosewood Institute Clinical Webinar Lecture Series. My name is Shaul Austin. I'm the Executive Clinical Director for the Palm Beach Institute, located in West Palm Beach, Florida. And today I'm excited to introduce Libby Neal, who is the Executive Clinical Director of Training and Education at the Rosewood Center for Eating Disorders and the Rosewood Institute. And today Libby is going to present Empathic Attunement, drawing out the eating disorder client using art therapy. At the end of this presentation, we will have time for questions and answers. You'll also see Libby's email address on the final slide for any questions, or if you'd like to have a copy of the slides emailed to you. So without further ado, let's start this, and I'm delighted to pass the baton to Libby Neal.
Well, thanks, Shaul. It's a wonderful introduction, and I'm thrilled to be here, and in particular, even more pleased to be discussing one of my favorite passions, art therapy, and the use of art interventions for folks with eating disorders. And today I hope to cover a couple of points with you guys that you can walk away with a clear understanding of what empathic attunement is and its role and benefit for the therapeutic process. I'm going to give you guys a description. I imagine that there are quite a few folks in the audience who are art therapists or are well versed in the topic, but I still feel the need to give an overview of the profession of art therapy. And then I'm going to discuss what the difference is in my mind between an art therapist and what I call an art facilitator, and I'm really hoping that you guys can walk away from this presentation with a bit of confidence in feeling like you can be an art facilitator. I'm not attempting to give you guys a thorough training to become an art therapist, but it is my hope that you can integrate some of these skills into your private practice immediately and have some starting point, if not a better place than where you currently walked into the webinar, or better understand the role of the therapist is in using art, and in particular, hopefully to instill in you guys the fact that the therapist doesn't play much of a role, whereas the art materials and the art itself are actually the facilitators of the session. And hopefully you guys can walk away with a sense of this large word, phenomenological language, and that describing your art, when you speak phenomenologically, you describe things rather than label them. And as an art facilitator, if you can step back and just simply describe what you see on the page rather than trying to use clinical jargon or clinical language in analyzing or diagnosing what you see on the page, as an art facilitator, you will really develop and see a lot of insights, gain a lot of insights that you wouldn't otherwise just by talking to your client. So the key word today is phenomenological, and we'll talk more about that. We'll discuss a little bit about how do you trust the art? How do you know the art's actually doing something? And when is it that you would need to jump in to do anything that the art may not be doing? And how to help your client talk about their artwork. Certainly they will feel pressured, whether you know it or not, as you as the facilitator, that you can see straight through them and go to their deepest, darkest secrets by their putting anything on the page in front of you. And certainly most of our folks with eating disorders are perfectionists, and they will be very intimidated by doing something wrong, or they'll feel pressured by not pleasing us as the facilitator. So you want to try and help them free them up in the way that they're able to talk about their artwork, and certainly that will develop more mutual rapport and a deeper empathic attunement. And then, of course, as we're going through the slides, I'll be discussing the specific interventions that I may have used for that particular piece of art that we're looking at, and then I'll be just giving you guys ideas along the way of interventions. And on the next slide, empathic attunement is the capacity, according to Kohut, is the capacity to think and feel oneself into the inner life of another person. As helping for professionals and as therapists, there may be a stronger capacity to develop or to be predisposed to develop an empathic attunement with somebody, especially if that helping professional has experience with the specialty or the area that that person, that client, is struggling with. And certainly folks who have had eating disorders, who go into the eating disorder field, may understand a little bit sooner what the client with the eating disorder is trying to describe, but we want to make sure that we're not over-assuming and jumping ahead of our client. We want to try and stay alongside of our client so that we can accept all states of mind that they are bringing to us. In other words, if we assume that we know too much, we might be skipping over the small stepping stones that they need to be taking in order to develop their own skills for their recovery process. This helps to include all the areas that they may not feel comfortable talking about to other people in their life, and certainly to therapists in the past. We know that our clients try and please us as clients, and they may leave out significant parts of their history. They may gloss over very challenging or abusive or painful parts of their past. And by accepting all states of mind with them, it may feel easier for them to discuss things that they use to cover taboos, such as eating disorder behaviors, self-harming behaviors, addiction choices, and an overwhelming sense of shame that may keep them from trusting us. That acceptance of all states of mind develops a form of trust, and there are many different ways to develop trust. And one of the most important capacities of trust is a consistency that we're non-judgmental. Certainly we may have opinions about things and we may help them to make better choices, but if we are walking alongside of our client developing empathic attunement, we are accepting all these areas that they're bringing to us, which models trust for them and helps them to instill in themselves that they can trust these very scary areas in themselves. That in and of itself develops a kind of mindfulness where somebody can embrace all aspects of themselves. They don't have to hide anything, compartmentalize, or keep track of stories and tales that they may have told somebody else. And on the next slide, this is an image of two animals right outside my door that I think really expresses empathic attunement. And certainly they share the similarities of both having 4 legs and hair and tails, but these two have earned an attunement, in my opinion, where they can walk up to each other and give each other what they need. They don't step on each other or jump or bite on each other, but they nuzzle each other, and probably, in my mind, I imagine they look forward to seeing each other the next day. And the next slide this is an image of a dog that I think really expresses a challenge of what we as therapists are faced with every day in finding empathy for our clients that brings so many complexities, and at times we may look at them and feel repulsed or scared, or that they have some hideous qualities, but yet there are some wonderful endearing qualities about them, and we have to, as professionals, find one similarity within ourselves with them in order to build just the seeds of empathy in order to develop empathic attunement. And then the next slide is, bear with me while I read to you this little blurb on the profession of art therapy. Art therapy is the therapeutic use of art making within a professional relationship by people who experience illness, trauma, or challenges in living, and by people who seek personal development. Through creating art and reflecting on the art products and processes, people can increase awareness of self and others, cope with symptoms, stress, and traumatic experiences, enhance cognitive abilities, and enjoy the life-affirming pleasures of making art. As a side note on this definition, my belief is that it's the process of creating and the process of figuring out what that art product means to the person is where the therapeutic benefits come from using art. And this presentation and my work in general is based on the process rather than primarily on the product of the art. And from this session, I hope that you guys, like I said, walk away feeling like you can free yourself up to be an art facilitator rather than pressure yourself to doing using art in the correct or incorrect way as an art therapist may have some experience in. And so a couple of things that are also important in the use of art therapy, of course, the art materials, and there are endless art materials that you guys can choose. And my recommendation is to everything you do, keep it simple, keep it basic, and you can use crayons, soft pastels, and crayons for years and years and years with great benefit, and never have to feel like you need to create or complicate things with other materials. And these materials allow for enough regression so that your client can have a deeper experience, but not so much regression as you might get with watery paints, let's say, that they may be at risk of not being able to reorganize themselves at the end of the art therapy session. An 18 by 24 inch white paper, it's a large sheet of paper that will allow for just enough fear in the client about how they might fill that large page, and it gives them a lot of territory to work and to expand their mind. The materials, this is one of my personal philosophies. The materials are the facilitator, not me. And on my best days, I can step out of the way of the materials and allow them to guide the sessions. And every now and then I will say something that may seem helpful or insightful for the client to facilitate their understanding of their art. But just know that as an art facilitator, you guys, if you can just allow the art to guide the session, you will get more clinical data and more information than you could in months and months and months of talking with your client. And I consider language to be a material. We've heard sayings for all of our life, it's not what you said, it's how you said it. And certainly language can forge or sculpt the direction of a therapy session or a discussion with a friend or any kind of communication with somebody. And if you allow yourself to use phenomenological exploration, again this big word is back, where you just describe what you see on the page instead of using clinical language or instead of feeling like you need to shore it up with some synthesized, you know, as clinicians we're very bright, we're very trained, and there may be a tendency to get to the bottom line in order for the client to get the most out of the session. But in just describing with some of these statements, you'll be using phenomenological exploration to create empathic rapport. And things like, I wonder if, and I'll give you an example. Let's say that the client has put a large dark circle in the center of the page. Well, I might instinctively feel like I need to say, oh, you have a dark circle on the page, you must be feeling deep, lost and deep in this dark hole, or you must be depressed. Well, it would be a better choice to say things like, I wonder if, you know, ... I wonder what you feel when you look at that circle, at that dark circle. It seems like you were really pressing hard on the crayons as you were making the dark circle. I noticed ... I noticed you created ... I noticed you created a dark circle on the page. Tell me about that. What did you find when you created the dark circle? Or tell me what you found when you created your imagery. And oftentimes I'll say nothing more to the group for the group process section of the group art therapy than why don't you guys start off by telling the group what you found when you created your art. And of course they'll ask lots of questions. What do you mean? What do you mean when I found when I was drawing, or when I was looking at, or when I was thinking? And I'll just say all the above, because it's important that they can have free reign. And I always say I'm not the therapy police. You guys can do whatever you want describing your artwork. And try not to make conclusions using clinical jargon, as I mentioned. And if there are any professional helpers in the room who want to do the right thing, I'm going to allow you to quit working so hard when you work with art. Let the art do the work. Just step back and allow what you see to form the dialogue between you and your client. And on the next slide, here's an example of an image with a gal who, you know, she certainly has put a lot on the page, and I thought I knew exactly what it meant because she spelled it out literally. Well, I stepped back and I got out of that I know what you've created mode, and I just asked her, I said, so tell me what you found. And this is a description of her in high school where her first memories of eating an egg salad sandwich were tied into being bullied for being fat, and then turning to using drugs with the popular kids so that, one, she could numb out, and two, so that she could be part of the popular group. And as you can see in the lower right-hand corner, there's the egg salad sandwich with the eyes on her, and everybody saying, what are you eating? You're so fat. And then her learning that if she purged it, that people wouldn't be talking to her for being fat. And then she started to see herself as being laughed at. She'd cover her body up as we move up the page to the upper right-hand corner. And then she started to, as we go to the left-hand side of the page, she started seeing images of herself at the lunch tables where she sat with the popular people. She ended up using alcohol at school to numb out in order to deal with her body image. She wouldn't eat at school. She'd get on the school bus, as you see in the lower left-hand corner, and from the point that the school bus dropped her off to her house, which she said took about 10 minutes running, she would run all the way home in order to not be bullied or to be beat up by the other girls in school. Now, I could have gathered some of that, but certainly I would have missed about 50% of that story had she not told me. And this was done by a 40-year-old as a memory of high school, just so you know. And on the next slide, here's another one where on the surface I thought, well, you know, I know what this means, but I stepped back from my my knowing mind, and I got curious with the client to develop empathic rapport. And I said, so tell me what you found. And this was done by a gal, and I'm going to say close to 50, about a 15 BMI, been in and out of eating disorder treatments for about 10 years. And the tornadoes were the repetitive voices in her head that went round and round and round and round, and that they were guided by a part of the image that you can't see, it's cut out, but in the clouds it says body image, and that these thoughts went through her head, and that if she restricted more, she wouldn't be as depressed and her body image wouldn't be as bad. And that juxtaposed to that at the bottom of the page is the bright sun in the ocean, and this was a symbol for how she covers that intensity in her mind in order to look happy on the surface. And if any of you guys have worked with folks with eating disorders before, you know how well our clients mask their tremendous deep-seated fears and feelings and repetitive thoughts. And part of that is due to Alexithymia, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But so she taught me that there was much more to this image than what I saw on the surface. And then the next image, or the next slide, is why use art for recovery? Well, it creates a holding place for our clients to practice failing. And, you know, as much as we'd like our clients to all of a sudden start doing things right after they visit us, there is a long learning curve for them in both the restoration of their mind, body, and spirit, but also in their ability to make good choices again, to recreate a life, or maybe create a healthy life for the first time. So that means that they need a place to fail. And there's a saying, which is a great saying, fake it to make it. Well, there's only so much you can fake, but you need a place to practice. So my saying is create it to make it. And the art allows for clients to review traumas that can show up as daymares or nightmares, memories of long-seated abuse, all the fears that they have of giving up their eating disorder or their addiction, that they actually realize that their hopes and dreams are gone because of everything that's happened to them. By creating that in the artwork, they can also see that there's a tremendous amount of resiliency that they have to have in order to survive all that, and that resiliency is part of their self-esteem, something that is usually about deteriorated or non-existent for our folks. Very important that they can see that they are as hardy a person as they could ever imagine, but they've beaten themselves down so much. And they can also see their internal dialogue, like the gal with the 3 tornadoes at the top. Those were her internal dialogues. And I don't mean psychotic voices, but I do mean that our clients hear things going through their head, ruminating thoughts about words from their parents, words from about their body image, things they have to do, planning, counting calories, whatever it is, it's going on all the time. And then the art allows for a place for us to help them to connect their emotions to their body sensations. Usually our clients are disconnected from the mind and the body, and part of their recovery process is going to be our helping them. And for example, with the dark circle that I was talking about earlier, we can ask the client, so what do you notice in your body as you're talking about what happened to you when you're drawing the dark circle, that memory? Well, the client may say, I notice my jaw's tensing up and I'm finding it hard to breathe. We can help them to understand that those are sensations in the body that you would notice when you're scared. And in the future, if you feel that again, it could be that you're scared. The place for taboo issues. And then the one thing that I really want to stress here today, you guys, is that you don't have to hear everything that the client learns and resolves in their artwork. It could be that they resolve some traumatic memories just by seeing it on the page or just by thinking about it as they were creating it. And our tendency in being helpers may be to go in and to really ask them lots of questions and make sure it was processed. But the truth is they can process a whole lot and heal a whole lot in just the doing, in just the creating of the art. And on the next slide, one concept is healthy versus not healthy imagination. And a healthy imagination is what we all have that helps us to create, so-called create the day. You wake up in the morning, you don't really know everything that's going to happen, but you have to still create a day. And it's this ability to form images and sensations not perceived through sight, hearing, or other senses. Helps provide meaning to experience, understanding to knowledge. So if somebody's having a conversation, you're listening, you are imagining the underlying meaning in order to make sense for the words that may not be included, and you gather, you infer what is going on around you, and hopefully it's to the positive, which would mean that it's a healthy imagination. It's the way that we make sense of the world. It evokes worlds, hidden formations, images, and sensations, such as wishes and dreams, and it is that aspect that helps folks to imagine their recovery. Imagine what it would be like if you didn't have your eating disorder. Well, that takes healthy imagination, right? And so some images I have of healthy imagination is some kittens from the barn who are preciously imagining what would happen were they to jump off the hay bales. imagining what that animal would do, which was a dog, barking up at them. And certainly Mama is sitting in the back imagining what it's going to be like when she has to jump on that dog below to protect her precious kittens. And the next image is of a client who was using healthy imagination, where she described to me what it's like to be in that dark hole underneath the bridge, underneath the water, and all the pressure when she's in her eating disorder in the dark hole, versus her using her healthy imagination, where she sees herself going one day as she moves into recovery into the light blue box with the sun as she gives up her eating disorder. And then the next slide is a group experience where everybody in the group gets to move around and make an image on the page of their impression of that particular person whose chair they're sitting in. And at the end, the original artist from this goes back to their starting position, and they can see how the group experiences them. This person probably has terrible self-image and terrible self-esteem, and she was genuinely surprised when she came back to her seat to see what other people thought she was quite vibrant and alive and a lot going on and dancing on her hat, on this beautiful red hat in front of the ocean, and that, you know, she was imagining, because she always talked about going to tropical places, and that people really remembered these qualities about her. It was very helpful for her to be empathically attuned more with herself and with peers. And then the next slide, this is a description of folks who we get in our office, the folks with unhealthy imagination, right? So intrusive mental images such as flashbacks or psychotic thoughts, and these images, intrusive mental images, come in long cartoons of imagery. So the role of imagery in symptom maintenance, such as PTSD, as you can imagine, for example, is if a person believes in their minds, this imagery is that when a noise goes off, that they're going to get hurt, they're going to stay away from loud noises. If a person imagines that their nose is 4 feet long, they will have a tendency to develop agoraphobia, which entrenches a major depressive disorder, both acute and chronic, and then leads to other psychosomatic illnesses that keep them housebound. And of course, these are just some basic examples. But then the images can take over attention and reflect negative self-goals, certainly making a person's choices for them. We know that our folks with eating disorders will make choices to stay away from public places, public outings, family outings, because they have formed negative conclusions about the imagery in their head. And then images are misinterpreted as fact, which increases a person's avoidance to triggers. And then I mentioned earlier alexithymia. This is very common in folks with eating disorders and panic attacks and substance abuse. It is the inability to connect emotional feelings with body sensations, and it's believed about 60% of folks with eating disorders are what's called alexithymic. And as you can imagine, this would really frustrate the empathic attunement, because as a therapist you would be wondering, well, I wonder how to break through that flat affect, or they're so depressed, or they're so disconnected from every aspect of what it is that we're doing in our session, and they literally may not know how to do anything differently. So part of using the artwork is to help them, as Peter Levine calls, remember the body-mind connection. And with art, you can, as the example I said with the dark circle, what do you notice in your body as you think about the story you're telling me that you're reminded of from the black circle? And then you can help them to understand how their body will have a sensation when their mind has an emotion. And really our goal with our clients for a healthy recovery process is to help them to name their emotions and connect them back with the derivative of their emotions in order to make good decisions. An example I have for artwork for alexithymia and imagination, this was done by a client where I asked her to just make an image of a safe place, and In fact, what she created is something that to me looks fairly daunting. I would not want to get caught in this place. Looks like there's no way out. It looks dark at night, scary. And of course, these are my associations with it, but I asked her, you know, tell me about this place. And in fact, she thought it was a very happy place with very positive memories. And then she started to describe it and noticed that actually the description of it with the dark skies and the tall trees and no way out really didn't match her feelings about or her memories of what happiness would be. And so she began to imagine what her happy place would be. And then on the next slide, oh, I'm noticing, yes, we are getting close to the end of the presentation. I want to give you guys just working reminders of what we've covered here, which is, if nothing else, if you don't walk away with anything else, allow yourself to step back and let the art work. Let the art do the work. If you just use follow the client's lead and use the phenomenological language, you will find a wealth of information in an hour-long session and uncover more than you might in months of verbal work. And remember, you don't have to hear everything the client learned for them to have had a healing experience, much like as in EMDR, where we know that the brain can rewire itself and we may never know about it. Same thing can happen with art. Trust that the art is doing its job. I had mentioned early in the beginning, how do you know if the art is doing its job? If you follow the steps of allowing the client to make the inferences and the insights, you have a very strong trust with the art and a very strong trust with the client building. Use simple materials, use simple language, ask questions, notice instead of make conclusions. Try and stay away from clinical jargon, and certainly try and take the pressure off yourself and enjoy the process. Let yourself suspend your need to make progress notes. We all have that pressure in clinical settings, and just follow what is happening with the client, and you will build a very strong empathic rapport that may translate to the next session or may need to be repeated over and over. And here's a copy of my email address, and please do contact me if there's anything that I can answer for you or help you with, and certainly if you'd like a copy of the slides, I'm more than happy to forward them to you.
Well, thank you, Libby, for this not only informative presentation, but it was really enlightening, and I was really struck by the part that said, let the materials facilitate the session. You know, that's in some ways let the art do the work. That's a great reminder to myself as a clinician and others is that the art or what we use will allow our clients to tell their story. So I was just wondering if, I really appreciate it. Are you ready for a few questions that we have?
Oh, I'd love a few questions. Thanks.
Okay, well, one of the first questions I received was, how do you handle the clients who have had a traumatic art experience? You know, whether it's in school or at home, and you know, maybe they believe they can't draw, or they have a brother who's the artist in the family, or a teacher told them they weren't very good at that, they should take up sports or whatever, you know. So how would you handle that when they're coming into your group?
Well, that's a wonderful question, and already the client has offered so much information, because saying that my brother had the talent, I didn't, I would then get curious about how they felt less than in the family, and they're already letting me know that the brother was special in some way. I would then become curious about how the eating disorder served a function, or the addiction served a function in uniqueness for the particular client. But certainly I would normalize for that client that I myself and everybody has had a traumatic experience with art, and unfortunately art teachers can say and do the wrong thing with good intentions. So I might go in the direction of just freeing them up to, if by their letting me know, they're actually showing me a form of resistance. So I would try and work with the resistance, not against the resistance, and just say, you know, if the intervention that I've given to the rest of the group doesn't work for you, how about you just make some images about how you're feeling right now? And they'll say, well, I'm not feeling anything. And I'll say, well, tell me something that happened before you came in the group. They might have had an experience being with their dietitian, and that was aggravating in the least, and they'll tell me how frustrated they were when they don't believe the dietitian, and I'll say, well, so what colors come to mind when you think of that conversation? They'll say red, orange, black, whatever. Well, good. See, you're already doing art therapy. What kind of shapes come to mind when you think about that conversation? And they'll say jagged or you know, knives or something like that. And I'll say, well, it sounds like you're off and running. How about you make some imagery about that?
Great. Do you have time for another question?
I do. Thank you.
Can anyone become an art facilitator?
Yeah, great question. You know, I think anybody who's listening today is particularly poised to become an art facilitator just by being in the helping profession or being an empath. And so I think that the answer is yes, and the key would be to just stepping back and allowing the art to do the work, and just know that you are not required to do anything more than to just ask your client some questions about the art and see where it goes.
Well, very good. Well, I would like to thank, I really like to thank the attendees for taking time out of their busy schedules. I know how that is. And once again, if you need to reach Libby, the email address is up there. She'll get back to you, or if you need maybe a copy of the slides. And I would just like to thank you again, Libby, for bringing us another great tool to help facilitate healing and hope for our clients. Thanks again.
Really appreciate it. Thanks, Joel.